After years of working with people who feel stuck, I have noticed a pattern. What we call lack of motivation is almost never the real issue. And the problem with misdiagnosing it, you spend months, sometimes years, trying to fix the wrong thing. More discipline, more willpower, better morning routines. And you're still in the same place. It looks like a motivation problem. It feels like a motivation problem. But underneath it, there's usually something else going on. And once you see it, you stop white-knuckling your way through and things actually start to move. Because here's the thing. Motivation isn't what gets you started. It's what shows up after something else clicks into place. And if you've ever had that experience where you suddenly feel back on it, like out of nowhere you're rolling, things feel almost easy, that's not random. Something shifted underneath. So in this video, I want to walk you through the 5 things that I actually see going on when someone says, I just can't find the motivation. Because once you understand this, you stop waiting for motivation and you start creating the conditions where it naturally shows up. Let me start with this first one because I think it's the most underrated. A lot of the time, what looks like low motivation is actually an identity mismatch. So here's what I mean. You might want to be someone who's consistent, disciplined, someone who actually follows through. But if I asked you honestly, do you see yourself that way yet? Most people pause there because there's a real difference between wanting something and quietly believing somewhere in the background, this is actually who I am. And when those two things don't line up, your brain will push back, not dramatically, just this low-level constant friction. You procrastinate, you overthink, you start and stop. It feels like a motivation issue, but really the behavior that you're trying to do, it just doesn't match how you currently see yourself. There's a lot of psychology behind this, the idea that we act in ways consistent with our self-image. So if your identity is still, I'm not really a consistent person, or I've never been someone who sticks with things, then every time that you try to act against that, it's going to feel much harder than it should. I ran into this myself when I started this channel. It wasn't a motivation issue. I could sit there and think, okay, I should film, I should be consistent, I should take this seriously. But there was still this quiet voice going, yeah, but I'm not really a YouTuber. And as long as that was the underlying story, everything felt heavier than it needed to. And honestly, this kept showing up for me in bigger ways too, even getting up on the TEDx stage. The thing that I had to work through wasn't preparation or content. It was the identity gap. The quiet background story of, am I really someone who does this? That talk ended up being about exactly this, that identity isn't the reward that you get after you change. It's actually the missing link that makes change stick in the first place. So the fix here isn't to sit around trying to pump yourself up. It's to start quietly updating the identity. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to flip the question. Instead of, how do I get motivated to do this? You ask, what would someone who's already this person do today? And then you do a version of that. Small, slightly imperfect, maybe a bit awkward, but you do it. Because the identity doesn't come first, it builds from evidence. Every time you act in line with that version of yourself, even in a small way, you're making it a little more real. You don't need a personality transplant. You just need enough proof that your brain starts going, oh, maybe this is who we are now. And once that starts to happen, motivation gets a lot less complicated. But here's the thing, even when the identity starts to shift, a lot of people still don't move. And it took me a while to understand why. Because on the surface, it looks like the same problem, but it's actually something different underneath. The second thing that I see constantly is what looks like procrastination, but is actually a lack of decision. This one is sneaky. On the surface, it feels like I just need to get myself to do the thing. But underneath, it's more like I haven't fully landed on whether I'm doing this. You can feel this pretty quickly in your own life. Think about something that you have been trying to do for a while. If you look closely, there's often this low-level, ongoing question running in the background. Am I actually doing this? And as long as that question is open, your brain keeps reopening the tab. There's actually a name for this in psychology. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. Unresolved decisions stay active in your mind, taking up space, creating background noise. Your energy isn't gone, it's just split. I felt this when I was deciding whether to leave medicine. Before the decision, I was exhausted, constantly thinking about it, talking myself in and out of it. And I could have easily called that lack of motivation. But the moment that I actually decided, not perfectly, not with full certainty, but decided, there was this immediate shift. Same circumstances, same risks, same unknowns, but suddenly there was energy because all of that back and forth, it collapsed into one direction. So if you're feeling stuck in that way, it's worth asking a slightly different question. Not, how do I get motivated? But have I actually decided? If the answer is kind of, or I think so, that's your clue. Sometimes you don't need more time or more clarity. You need a cleaner decision, something that your brain can actually organize around. Even if it's just, I'm doing this for the next 30 days, or I'm moving forward with this version. Because once a decision is made, your brain stops spinning and starts working. And that shift alone can feel like motivation coming back online. Quick pause here. A lot of what I'm walking through in this video goes even deeper in my free self-sabotage recovery guide. It is designed to help you to see the specific patterns that are keeping you stuck and what to actually do about them. So the link is in the description. It's completely free and definitely worth grabbing before you forget. Now, the next one is where it gets a bit more uncomfortable because this one isn't really about thinking or deciding. It's more about what's happening underneath that. And most people never name it. This third one is a bit uncomfortable to sit with, but it explains a lot. Sometimes what you're calling lack of motivation is actually avoidance. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because on some level, the thing that you want doesn't feel entirely safe. And this can be subtle. You can consciously want something, more visibility or a new direction or putting yourself out there, while another part of you is quietly going, I'm not sure about this. Because with most meaningful goals, there's exposure. If you show up more, people can judge you. If you succeed, expectations shift. If you change direction, people have opinions. And your brain reads all of that as potential risk. So it slows you down, creates resistance, nudges you toward easier, more familiar ground. And it gets labeled as, I just can't find the motivation. But if you look closer, it often sounds more like, this feels a bit exposed. This feels like I might be seen in a way that I am not used to. This can show up in surprisingly ordinary ways. Someone who keeps putting off a doctor's appointment that they know they need, for example. Or someone who genuinely wants to have a conversation with a partner, but keeps finding reasons to wait. It's not that they don't care. It's that on some level, the outcome feels uncertain, and uncertain feels unsafe. I felt this in the early days of putting content out. It wasn't that I didn't have ideas. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was a very real awareness of being visible in a new way, being out there in a way that I wasn't used to. That took some genuine adjustment. So rather than trying to push through it with more force, it's often more effective to just name what's happening. Of course, this feels a bit edgy. This is new territory. And then make it easier to step into smaller reps, lower stakes, a version you can actually follow through on. Because when something feels even slightly safer, your nervous system settles. And when that happens, action becomes a lot more available. So if you're stuck here, it's worth asking, is there something about this that feels a bit exposed, even mildly, because once you name it, you can work with it. And that is usually when things start moving again. But sometimes it's not about safety at all. Sometimes you want it, you have decided, you're not particularly scared, and you're still not moving. And that one has a surprisingly simple explanation. And this is the fourth one, and it is very common, especially if you've got a lot going on in your life. Sometimes I can't get myself to do anything is just overwhelm, wearing a different label. You've got too many things in your head, too many directions, too many things that you should be doing, and your brain does something very efficient. It just shuts down. Because if it can't clearly see what's next or where to start, it's easier to do nothing than to choose wrong. So you end up in this strange state, busy thinking about everything, but not really moving toward anything. And again, you can easily say, I have no motivation right now. But it's not motivation, it's overload. Too much input, not enough structure. I've been in phases like this, multiple projects, ideas, commitments, and on paper, it all looks very exciting. But day to day, it feels heavy. And the instinct is to think, why can't I just get on with it? But when I step back and simplify, pick one clear priority, define what done looks like, cut the moving parts, everything feels lighter almost immediately. It doesn't feel easy necessarily, but doable. So if this is where you are, the shift is practical. Stop trying to generate more motivation and reduce the load. Fewer active goals, clearer next steps, a smaller version that you can actually complete. Even just asking, what's the one thing that would actually move this forward today? That alone can cut through a lot of noise because motivation doesn't disappear when you're overwhelmed. It just gets buried. So clear some space and it tends to resurface on its own. Okay, so the last one. Now, this is probably the one that I see the most often, and it's the one that is the hardest to argue people out of because it feels completely logical. It feels like patience, but it's actually the thing that keeps people stuck longer than anything else. You're waiting to feel like it. Waiting for that moment where it feels easier, clearer, where you wake up and think, okay, today is the day. And I get it. We have all had those moments where suddenly you're motivated, you're in motion, everything is clicking. The problem is those moments are unreliable. You can't build anything consistent on something that comes and goes. So this quiet pattern sets in. I'll start when I feel more ready. I will do it when I'm in the right headspace. And meanwhile, nothing really changes. Here's what is actually happening. Motivation tends to follow action, not the other way around. There's a concept in psychology called behavioral activation. It's used a lot in treating depression, actually. The idea is simple. You don't wait until you feel better to start doing things. You start doing things, and that begins to shift how you feel. You probably already know this from your own life. There are plenty of days that you don't feel like working out, but once you start, it's fine, sometimes even good. Same with getting into a piece of work or filming something or having a hard conversation. The entry point is almost always the hardest part. I've experienced this more times than I can count with writing. Some days I'm thinking, I really don't feel like doing this. And if I waited for that feeling to change, it probably wouldn't. But once I start to open up the document that I'm working on, getting a few sentences down, just getting into it, then the energy shifts. Not dramatically, but just enough. So the shift here is simple, but not always easy. You stop treating motivation as a prerequisite, and you start treating it as something that shows up once you're in motion. That might mean starting before you feel ready, doing a smaller version than you planned, or letting it be a bit messy. Because once you lower the threshold to start, you give motivation something to attach to. And over time, you build this quiet trust with yourself. I don't need to feel like it to begin. That changes things more than most people expect. So if you've been sitting there thinking, I just don't have the motivation right now, then it might be worth questioning that a little. Because when you look at what's actually going on, it's usually something more specific. Maybe there's a gap between who you see yourself as and what you're trying to do. Maybe you haven't fully decided. Maybe part of it feels a bit exposed. Maybe you've just got too much on your plate, or you've been waiting for a feeling that isn't particularly reliable. When you start to see it that way, it becomes workable. You're not sitting around hoping that motivation shows up. You're adjusting the conditions and tightening decisions and simplifying and taking small steps that build evidence and making things feel a little safer to move forward. And then something shifts. You stop feeling stuck and you start seeing movement again, even if it's small. That's usually the turning point, not some big surge of energy, just the shift from stalled to in motion. If this resonated, I would watch this video next. It's called How to Stop Feeling Powerless in Your Own Life, because that's really what sits underneath a lot of this, feeling like you're waiting instead of driving. That video is going to help you flip that. I will link it on the next screen, and then I will see you there. Is my hair all like stringy? Okay, do that again. That didn't make any sense. But here's the thing. Even when what? Okay. Tea first. I've just given up on trying to keep my cup clean. That's just the way that it is. Lipstick, I can't do anything about it.